The Kansas sun hung low, painting the wheat fields in hues of gold and amber. Dust swirled lazily in the evening breeze, carrying the scent of dry earth and the faint tang of rusted metal. At the edge of the Whitaker farm, where the fields met a sagging barbed wire fence, an old John Deere tractor sat like a forgotten relic, its green paint chipped and faded to a sickly gray. The machine had been there since 1981, the summer the Whitaker family vanished. No one spoke of it much anymore, not in town, not at the diner where farmers swapped stories over bitter coffee. But the tractor remained, a silent monument to a mystery no one dared unravel. Clara Hensley, 32, stood by the fence, her calloused hands gripping the splintered post. Her boots sank slightly into the cracked earth, and the wind tugged at her braid, loose strands catching the last light. Clara had grown up on this land, inherited it from her uncle, Amos Whitaker, the last of the family to work the fields before he, his wife, and their teenage daughter disappeared. She'd been 9 when it happened, too young to understand why her uncle's farmhouse sat empty, why the tractor was never moved, why the town of Harrow seemed to close ranks around the silence. Now, as the new owner, Clara felt the weight of that silence like a stone in her chest. She squinted at the tractor, its silhouette jagged against the horizon. The townsfolk called it cursed, a half-joking whisper, but Clara wasn't superstitious. She was practical, a farmer's daughter through and through, with a knack for fixing engines and reading the sky for rain. Yet something about the tractor unnerved her. The way its cab door hung slightly ajar, creaking when the wind picked up. The way the wheat seemed to grow thinner around it, as if the soil itself recoiled. "Clara, you out there?" A voice cut through the dusk, warm but edged with worry. It was Nate Carver, the local veterinarian, striding across the field with his lanky frame and a flashlight bobbing in his hand. At 40, Nate was Harrow's unofficial problem solver, part doctor, part mechanic, part confidant to a town that trusted him more than they trusted each other. His flannel shirt was rolled to the elbows, revealing forearms scarred from years of wrangling livestock. "Over here," Clara called, waving a hand. "Just looking." Nate stopped beside her, his flashlight beam grazing the tractor. "That old thing again? Thought you were gonna scrap it." Clara shrugged, her eyes still on the machine. "Thought about it. But it's been here longer than me. Feels wrong to just haul it off." Nate chuckled, but it was a tight sound. "Folks say it's bad luck. You know how they get." He paused, his gaze lingering on the tractor's cab. "You ever look inside?" "Not yet," Clara admitted. "Figured it's just rust and spiderwebs." Nate nodded, but his expression was unreadable. "Maybe. But you're the boss now. Your call." They stood in silence, the crickets starting their nightly chorus. Clara's mind drifted to the stories she'd overheard as a kid, whispers of the Whitakers' last day. Amos had been seen arguing with a stranger in town, a man no one recognized. His wife, Ellen, had been baking pies for the county fair, her kitchen radio blaring gospel. Their daughter, Lily, 16, had been sneaking out to meet a boyfriend no one could name. Then, one July night, they were gone. No note, no bodies, no trace. The sheriff called it a runaway case, but no one believed it. "Not really." Clara shook off the memory. "You ever hear anything about them? My uncle and the others?" Nate's jaw tightened. "Bits and pieces. Nothing solid. Town's good at keeping secrets." She nodded, sensing he wasn't saying everything. Nate had been around back then, a teenager himself, probably fixing fence posts or tending horses. If anyone knew more, it was him. But pressing him now felt like pushing a locked door. "Let's head back," she said, turning toward the farmhouse. The sky was darkening, stars pricking through the violet haze. As they walked, Clara glanced over her shoulder. The tractor's cab door swayed slightly, as if nudged by an unseen hand. The farmhouse was a 2-story relic, its white paint peeling like old skin. Inside, the air smelled of aged wood and the faint sweetness of Clara's morning coffee. She'd been fixing the place up since moving in 3 months ago, new floorboards, patched walls, a stove that didn't belch smoke. But the house still felt like it belonged to someone else. Amos's books still lined the shelves, and Ellen's faded curtains hung in the kitchen. Clara hadn't touched Lily's room upstairs, its door shut tight like a sealed tomb. At the kitchen table, Clara poured Nate a glass of iced tea. He sat across from her, his hands fidgeting with the glass. "You settling in okay?" he asked. "Trying to," Clara said. place needs work. And the town, they look at me like I'm stirring up ghosts. Nate's eyes softened. Give M time. They're not used to a Whitaker back on this land. Clara nodded, but the weight in her chest didn't lift. She'd come back to Harrow to start fresh after a messy divorce, to reclaim the farm and make it her own. But the town's wariness, the tractor's looming presence, and the unanswered questions about her family made it feel like she was trespassing. A knock at the door startled them both. Clara frowned. It was past 8, too late for visitors in Harrow. She crossed the room and opened the door to find Maisie Tate, the 15-year-old daughter of the town's mechanic. Maisie's braid was unraveling, and her eyes were wide, her breath coming fast. "Clara, you gotta come quick," Maisie said, clutching a flashlight. "I was cutting through your field, and I saw something. By the tractor." Clara's stomach twisted. "Saw what?" Maisie hesitated, glancing at Nate, who joined them at the door. "I don't know. Something, moving. Inside the cab." Nate's brow furrowed. "You sure it wasn't a coyote? Or the wind?" "It wasn't the wind," Maisie snapped, her voice sharp with fear. "I heard scratching. Like something trying to get out." Clara exchanged a look with Nate. The tractor had been abandoned for decades, nothing living could be inside. But Maisie's fear was real, and Clara's own unease was creeping back. "All right," Clara said, grabbing her jacket. "Let's go see." The three of them trekked across the field, the night air cool and heavy with the scent of wheat. Maisie's flashlight beam danced ahead, catching the glint of the tractor's rusted frame. As they approached, Clara's pulse quickened. The cab door was still ajar, swaying gently. The scratching sound Maisie described was faint but unmistakable, a rhythmic, metallic scrape, like nails on steel. Nate shone his flashlight into the cab. The beam illuminated a tangle of cobwebs, a cracked dashboard, and a seat sagging with rot. Nothing moved. But the scratching persisted, coming from somewhere deeper inside. "Stay back," Clara said to Maisie, stepping closer. She reached for the cab door, her fingers brushing the cold, rusted handle. The scratching stopped abruptly, leaving only the hum of crickets. Nate moved beside her, his flashlight steady. "Careful," he murmured. Clara pulled the door open, wincing at the groan of hinges. The interior was a mess of dust and decay, but something caught her eye, a series of deep, jagged marks etched into the inner wall of the cab. They weren't random scratches. They were deliberate, almost like letters, though too worn to read clearly. Clara's breath caught. The marks were on the inside, as if someone had been trapped, clawing to get out. "What the hell?" Nate whispered, leaning closer. His flashlight flickered, casting shadows that seemed to writhe. Maisie gasped behind them. "Look!" She pointed to the ground near the tractor's rear wheel. Half buried in the dirt was a small, tarnished object, a locket, its silver surface dulled but intact. Clara knelt and picked it up, her fingers trembling. The locket was engraved with a single initial, L. "Lily," Clara said softly, her voice barely audible. Her cousin's name, unspoken for decades, felt heavy in the air. Before anyone could speak, a low, guttural sound came from the field beyond, a sound that wasn't wind or animal, but something else, something that made the hairs on Clara's neck stand up. The flashlight beam swung toward the darkness, catching nothing but endless rows of wheat. Nate grabbed Clara's arm. "We need to go. Now." As they hurried back toward the farmhouse, Clara clutched the locket, her mind racing. The tractor's scratches, the locket, the sound in the field, it was all connected, she was sure of it. But to what? And why had no one searched for her family all those years ago? At the farmhouse door, Clara turned for one last look at the tractor. Its silhouette loomed against the starry sky, and for a moment, she swore she saw the cab door move, just a fraction, as if inviting her back. The Whitaker farmhouse kitchen glowed faintly under the flicker of a single bulb, casting long shadows across the worn linoleum floor. Clara Hensley sat at the table, the silver locket with the engraved L resting in her palm. Its weight felt heavier than it should, as if it carried the ghost of her cousin Lily. The scratching from the tractor's cab, the eerie sound in the field, and the town's silence about her family's disappearance churned in her mind. Outside, the Kansas night pressed against the windows, thick with the hum of crickets and the occasional rustle of wheat. Nate Carver paced near the stove, his boots scuffing the floor. "We need to tell someone, Clara. The sheriff, maybe. That locket, it's something." Maisie Tate, still shaken, sat cross-legged on a chair, clutching a mug of tea Clara had made to calm her. "No way," Maisie said, her voice sharp. "Sheriff Dawson won't care. My dad says he's useless for anything bigger than a bar fight." Clara's grip tightened on the locket. Maisie was probably right. Sheriff Dawson had been around in '81, a deputy back then, and he'd closed the Whitaker case faster than a barn door in a storm. No investigation, no search parties, just a report calling it a family matter. Clara had been too young to question it then, but now, with the locket and those scratches, the dismissal felt like a betrayal. "I'm not waiting for Dawson," Clara said, standing. "We need to figure out what's going on ourselves. Starting with that tractor." Nate stopped pacing, his jaw tight. "Clara, it's been 40 years. Whatever's out there, it's not gonna be pretty." "Then we better find out before someone else does," she replied, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. She glanced at Maisie. "You don't have to come, kid. You've done enough." Maisie's eyes flashed with defiance. "I'm not a kid. And I'm not staying here alone while you two poke around in the dark." Nate sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Fine. But we stick together. And we bring tools." The field was a sea of shadows, the wheat swaying like whispers under a half-moon. Clara led the way, her flashlight cutting a narrow path toward the tractor. She carried a crowbar from the barn, its weight reassuring in her hand. Nate followed, a hammer tucked into his belt, his own flashlight sweeping the ground. Maisie trailed close, her breath quick, clutching a tire iron she'd grabbed from her dad's truck. The tractor loomed ahead, its rusted frame glinting faintly. The cab door hung open, just as they'd left it. Clara's pulse quickened as she approached, the memory of the scratches, deep, deliberate, almost desperate, burning in her mind. She climbed onto the tractor's step, the metal groaning under her weight, and shone her light inside. The marks were still there, etched into the cab's inner wall, but in the moonlight, they seemed sharper, more like letters than she'd noticed before. An L, maybe a W, jagged and uneven, as if carved in a frenzy. "See this?" Clara said, pointing. "It's not just scratches. It's something." Nate leaned in, his flashlight joining hers. "Could be initials. Or a message. Hard to tell with the rust." He paused, his voice lowering. "You think Lily did this?" Clara didn't answer. The thought of her cousin, barely 16, trapped inside this metal coffin made her stomach lurch. She pushed the thought aside and scanned the cab. The floor was littered with dirt and brittle leaves, but something caught her eye, a glint beneath the seat. She reached in, brushing aside cobwebs, and pulled out a small, tarnished key, its teeth worn but intact. "What's that for?" Maisie asked, peering over Clara's shoulder. "No idea," Clara said, turning the key over in her hand. It was too small for the tractor, too delicate for a barn lock. "But it's been here a long time." Nate frowned, his flashlight sweeping the field. "We should check the barn. If there's a lock this fits, it might be there." The Whitaker barn stood 100 yards away, its red paint faded to a sickly pink, its roof sagging like an old man's shoulders. Clara hadn't spent much time inside since moving back, too many memories of her Uncle Amos sharpening tools or teaching her to bale hay. But now, with the key in her pocket and the locket around her neck, the barn felt like the next piece of the puzzle. Inside, the barn smelled of mildew and old straw, the air thick with dust that danced in their flashlight beams. The space was cluttered with relics of the Whitaker farm, rusted pitchforks, stacks of warped crates, a broken plow leaning against a wall. Clara's boots crunched on the dirt floor as she moved deeper, her eyes scanning for anything that might take the key. Maisie wandered toward a corner, her tire iron tapping against a wooden beam. "This place gives me the creeps," she muttered. "Like it's watching us." "It's just a barn," Nate said, but his voice lacked conviction. He was inspecting a pile of old feed sacks, his hands moving carefully, as if expecting something to jump out. Clara stopped at a trapdoor in the floor, half hidden under a pile of rotting burlap. She'd never noticed it as a kid, but then again, she'd never been allowed to roam the barn alone. She knelt, brushing away the burlap, and found a rusted padlock securing the trapdoor. Her heart skipped as she pulled the key from her pocket. It slid into the lock with a faint click, but when she turned it, the mechanism stuck. "Damn it," she muttered, jiggling the key. "It's rusted shut." Nate crouched beside her, his hammer in hand. "Want me to break it?" Clara hesitated. Whatever was under the trapdoor had been hidden for decades. Breaking the lock felt like crossing a line she couldn't uncross. But the scratches, the locket, the key, they were all pointing to this. "Do it," she said. Nate swung the hammer, and the lock shattered with a dull clang. Clara lifted the trapdoor, its hinges screaming, revealing a narrow ladder descending into darkness. A cold, damp draft rose from below, carrying the faint smell of earth and something sharper, like old metal or decay. Maisie stepped back, her face pale. "You're not going down there, are you?" Clara glanced at Nate, who gave a grim nod. "We have to," she said. "Stay up here, Maisie. Keep watch." Maisie opened her mouth to protest but closed it, nodding reluctantly. "Fine. But if you're not back in 10 minutes, I'm getting my dad." Clara descended first, her boots slipping slightly on the ladder's worn rungs. Nate followed, his flashlight casting jagged shadows on the dirt walls. The cellar was small, no bigger than a bedroom, with a low ceiling and shelves lined with dusty jars, pickles and preserves, long spoiled. In the center sat a wooden crate, its lid nailed shut. Clara's flashlight beam lingered on the crate. "This doesn't feel right," she whispered. Nate didn't respond. He was staring at the crate, his face tight. "Let's open it." They pried the lid off with the crowbar, the nails groaning as they gave way. Inside was a jumble of papers, yellowed letters, receipts, a few grainy photos of the Whitaker family. Clara's breath caught as she recognized her Uncle Amos, his arm around Ellen, Lily grinning beside them. But beneath the papers was something else, a tattered leather journal, its cover embossed with the same L as the locket. Clara opened it, her hands trembling. The pages were filled with Lily's handwriting, neat at first but growing frantic toward the end. One entry, dated July 10, 1981, read, "He's watching us again. Dad says it's nothing, but I saw him by the tractor. He knows." "Who's he?" Nate asked, reading over her shoulder. Before Clara could answer, a sharp cry came from above. "Clara! Nate!" Maisie's voice was panicked. "Someone's out there." They scrambled up the ladder, Clara clutching the journal. Maisie stood by the barn door, her tire iron raised, her eyes fixed on the field. "I saw someone," she whispered. "Near the tractor. Just a shadow, but it moved." Clara's heart pounded as she peered into the darkness. The tractor stood silent, its cab door still open, but the wheat beyond swayed unnaturally, as if parted by something, or someone, passing through. Nate grabbed her arm. "We need to get back to the house. Now." As they hurried across the field, Clara's mind raced. The journal, the key, the shadow, it was all connected to her family's disappearance, she was sure. But the shadow Maisie saw felt like a warning, a sign that whatever had taken the Whitakers wasn't gone. And as they reached the farmhouse, Clara caught a glimpse of something glinting in the wheat, a flash of metal, there and gone. She locked the door behind them, her hand still on the journal. "We're not done," she said, her voice firm despite the fear clawing at her. "Tomorrow, we go back. And we find out who he is." The morning sun rose over the Whitaker farm, painting the wheat fields in a soft, golden haze. Clara Hensley hadn't slept. The leather journal, its pages filled with Lily's frantic handwriting, lay open on the kitchen table, its words burned into her mind. "He's watching us again. Dad says it's nothing, but I saw him by the tractor. He knows." The cryptic entry, dated the day before her family vanished in July 1981, gnawed at her. Who was he? And why had no one searched for them? Clara stood at the kitchen window, staring at the distant tractor, its rusted frame a dark blot against the field. The scratches inside its cab, the locket with Lily's initial, the key to the barn cellar, it all pointed to a truth the town of Harrow had buried. She clutched the journal, her fingers tracing the embossed L. Today, she'd find answers, no matter how much the town wanted to forget. Nate Carver's truck rumbled up the driveway, kicking up dust. He stepped out, his face grim, carrying a toolbox and a thermos of coffee. Maisie Tate followed, her braid swinging, her tire iron still tucked in her belt like a talisman. The girl's bravado couldn't hide the fear in her eyes after last night's sighting of the shadow in the field. "You sure about this?" Nate asked, setting the toolbox on the porch. "Poking around that tractor again, it's stirring things up." "I'm sure," Clara said, her voice steady. "If that journal's right, something happened out there. And someone knows more than they're saying." Maisie glanced at the field, her face pale. What if that thing comes back? That shadow? Clara met her eyes. Then we face it. Together. The trio headed to the tractor, the morning air heavy with the scent of dew-soaked wheat. Clara's boots crunched on the dry earth, her crowbar swinging at her side. The tractor loomed larger as they approached, its cab door still ajar, creaking faintly in the breeze. The scratches inside, jagged, desperate marks, seemed to pulse with unspoken secrets. Nate climbed into the cab, his flashlight sweeping the interior. "These marks," he said, his voice low. "They're deep. Not made with a tool. More like fingernails." Clara's stomach twisted. She pictured Lily, trapped, clawing at the metal. But how? The tractor was in an open field, not a cage. She shook her head, focusing. "Let's check the engine. Maybe there's something we missed." Nate popped the hood, revealing a tangle of rusted parts. His hands, calloused from years of veterinary work, moved deftly, probing the machinery. "This thing hasn't run in decades," he said. "But look here." He pointed to a small, hidden compartment near the fuel tank, its latch nearly rusted shut. Clara pried it open with her crowbar, revealing a bundle of cloth wrapped around something hard. She unwrapped it carefully, revealing a small, tarnished revolver. Its grip was worn, the barrel pitted with rust. Clara's breath caught. This was in there all this time? Maisie peered over her shoulder. "Is it loaded?" Nate took the gun, checking it with practiced care. "Empty. But it's old. Could be from '81. He met Clara's eyes. "You think this was Amos's?" Clara nodded slowly. Her uncle had been a practical man, not prone to carrying weapons unless he felt threatened. The journal's words echoed, "He's watching us." Maybe he thought he needed protection. The discovery hung heavy in the air. Clara tucked the gun into her jacket, her mind racing. A gun, a locket, a key, scratches, each clue deepened the mystery, but the pieces didn't fit yet. And the shadow Maisie saw last night felt like a warning, a sign that the past wasn't as buried as the town believed. They returned to the barn, the journal in Clara's hand. The cellar trapdoor was still open, the ladder descending into the musty darkness. Clara flipped through the journal, searching for more clues. The entries grew increasingly erratic, Lily's neat handwriting dissolving into scrawled fragments. One page, dated July 9, 1981, read, "The lights in the field again last night. Dad's angry, Mom's scared. I followed him to the tractor. He didn't see me. He was digging." "Digging?" Maisie read over Clara's shoulder. "Digging what?" Clara's eyes scanned the field beyond the barn. The wheat stretched endlessly, unbroken except for the tractor and a dry creek bed in the distance. "Let's find out." They trekked to the creek bed, a shallow trench line with cracked earth and stunted grass. Clara knelt, running her hand over the ground. It was hard, untouched for years, but Lily's words suggested something was hidden here. She began digging with her crowbar, the soil giving way in clumps. Nate and Maisie joined in, using their hands and a shovel from the barn. After 20 minutes, Clara's crowbar hit something solid. She scraped away the dirt, revealing a metal box, about the size of a shoebox, its surface rusted but intact. Her heart pounded as she pried it open. Inside was a stack of letters, bound with twine, and a small, faded photograph of a man she didn't recognize, tall, dark-haired, standing by a truck, his face half hidden by a hat. "Who's this?" Maisie asked, holding the photo. Clara shook her head. "No idea. But he's not Amos." She untied the letters, scanning the top one. It was addressed to Ellen, her aunt, in unfamiliar handwriting. The words were brief but chilling. "Meet me at the tractor. Midnight. Bring it." "Bring what?" Nate asked, his voice tense. Clara's mind flashed to the revolver. "Maybe this," she said, patting her jacket. "Or something else." The letters were a mix of love notes and warnings, all unsigned, all dated in the months before the disappearance. One, dated July 8, 1981, read, "He knows. Be careful." Clara's hands trembled. The "he" in Lily's journal and the letters, was it the same person? And what did he know? As the sun climbed higher, the heat pressed down, and the field felt oppressively silent. Clara's eyes kept drifting to the tractor, its silhouette a constant reminder of the mystery's heart. They decided to head back to the farmhouse to read the letters more thoroughly, but as they crossed the field, Maisie froze. "There," she whispered, pointing to the wheat. It's back. Clara followed her gaze. The wheat was moving, a subtle ripple cutting through the stalks, heading toward the creek bed. It wasn't the wind, the air was still. Nate grabbed his hammer, his knuckles white. "Stay close," he said. Clara's hand went to the revolver in her jacket, her pulse racing. The ripple stopped, and for a moment, nothing moved. Then a figure emerged from the wheat, a man, tall and wiry, his face obscured by a battered hat. He held a shovel, its blade glinting in the sunlight. He stared at them, his posture tense, then turned and vanished back into the field. Who was that? Maisie gasped. Clara's mind raced. The man in the photo, could it be him? But he'd be older now, in his 60s at least. This man moved too fast, too young. "I don't know," she said. "But he's looking for something." Nate's eyes narrowed. "The box. He knows we found it." Clara clutched the journal and the box, her resolve hardening. The shadow, the letters, the gun, they were closing in on something dangerous, something the town had hidden for decades. "We need to keep this safe," she said, holding up the box. "And we need to find out who he is before he comes back." As they hurried to the farmhouse, Clara glanced back at the field. The wheat was still, but the air felt charged, like the calm before a storm. The man was out there, watching, and Clara knew he wasn't done with them. The Whitaker farmhouse felt smaller, its walls closing in as Clara Hensley spread the contents of the rusted metal box across the kitchen table. The stack of letters, tied with frayed twine, sat beside the faded photograph of the unknown man and Lily's journal, its pages brittle under the lamplight. The revolver from the tractor's hidden compartment rested at the table's edge, a silent reminder of the danger creeping closer. Outside, the Kansas night was still, the wheat fields cloaked in darkness, but Clara couldn't shake the image of the wiry man with the shovel, vanishing into the stalks like a ghost. Nate Carver sat across from her, his coffee untouched, his eyes scanning the letters. Maisie Tate perched on a stool, her tire iron leaning against the wall, her usual bravado replaced by a tense quiet. The sighting in the field had rattled them all, and the question hung heavy: who was the man, and what did he want with the box? Clara opened another letter, her fingers careful not to tear the fragile paper. It was dated June 25, 1981, written in the same sharp, slanted handwriting as the others. "Ellen, I'll wait one more night. Bring it to the creek bed. Don't tell Amos." Clara's heart sank. Her Aunt Ellen had been keeping secrets from her uncle, secrets tied to the tractor, the creek bed, and whatever it was. "This doesn't make sense," Clara said, her voice low. Ellen was happy. Everyone said so. Why was she sneaking around? Nate rubbed his jaw, his scarred forearms tense. Maybe she wasn't. Maybe she was scared. These letters sound like threats. Maisie leaned forward, her eyes on the photograph. "That guy in the picture, he looks like the one I saw today. Same hat, same build. But that's impossible, right? He'd be old now." Clara nodded, but doubt gnawed at her. The man in the field moved too swiftly for someone in their 60s. Yet the hat, the posture, it was too close to be coincidence. She flipped through Lily's journal again, searching for answers. A new entry caught her eye, dated July 11, 1981, the day the Whitakers vanished. "I told Mom we should leave. She said we can't, not yet. The money's hidden, but he'll find it. I'm scared." "Money?" Clara murmured. "What money?" Nate's brow furrowed. Could be why no one searched. If Amos was mixed up in something, debts, deals, maybe the town thought they ran off to dodge it. Clara's stomach twisted. Her uncle had been a proud man, stubborn but honest. The idea of him hiding money or running from trouble didn't fit. But the journal, the gun, the letters, they painted a different picture, one the town of Harrow had buried for 40 years. The next morning, Clara woke to the smell of rain on the horizon, the air heavy with the promise of a storm. She, Nate, and Maisie headed back to the creek bed, determined to find more clues. The field was muddy, the wheat drooping under the weight of dew. Clara carried the journal and the photograph, the revolver tucked into her jacket. Nate had his hammer, and Maisie gripped her tire iron, her eyes darting to the stalks. The creek bed looked different in daylight, its cracked earth softened by the morning mist. Clara knelt where they'd found the box, her hands sifting through the dirt. "Lily said he was digging," she said. "If there's money, or something else, it might still be here." Nate scanned the horizon, his posture tense. We need to be quick. That guy could come back. They dug for an hour, their tools scraping against rock and root. Just as Clara was about to give up, her crowbar hit something hard, a second metal box, smaller than the first, buried deeper. She pried it open, revealing a bundle of cash, brittle and stained, wrapped in oilcloth. Beside it was a small, leather-bound ledger, its pages filled with numbers and initials. Clara flipped through the ledger, her pulse racing. The entries listed dates, amounts, and cryptic codes: JH, 500, June 15, 81, TR, 200, July 1, 81. This is a record of payments, she said. But for what? Nate took the ledger, his eyes narrowing. Looks like a debt book. Amos might have been lending money, or collecting it. Maisie's voice cut through. Guys, look. She pointed to the ground near the box, where a fresh set of boot prints marked the mud. They were deep, recent, leading back toward the tractor. Clara's blood ran cold. He was here, she whispered. Last night, after we left. Nate gripped his hammer. We're being watched. They returned to the farmhouse, the ledger and cash hidden in Clara's bag. The weight of the discovery pressed on her. Her family hadn't just vanished. They'd been entangled in something dangerous, something tied to money and secrets. But the boot prints suggested the past wasn't gone. Someone was still looking, still digging. Clara spread the ledger on the table, cross-referencing the initials with the letters. One set kept appearing, JH. The same initials were scrawled in the margins of Lily's journal, circled with a shaky hand. Whoever JH is, Clara said, they're the key. Nate frowned, his fingers tracing the ledger. I know that name. JH, Jonah Hale. He was a handyman back in 81, worked odd jobs around Harrow. Quiet guy, kept to himself. Lived out by the old mill. Clara's heart skipped. Is he still around? Nate shook his head. Left town years ago. Or so folks thought. But that guy in the field, the hat, the shovel. Could be him. Maisie's eyes widened. Wait, you think he's back? After all this time? Clara didn't answer. Her mind was on the photograph, the man's face half hidden by the hat. If Jonah Hale was involved, why was he watching them now? And what did he want with the money, or whatever else was hidden? Determined to find answers, Clara drove to the old mill, a crumbling relic on the edge of Harrow. Nate and Maisie came along, the ledger and journal tucked safely in the truck. The mill's wooden frame sagged under years of neglect, its wheel long still, the air thick with the scent of damp wood and moss. Clara's boots sank into the muddy ground as she approached, her eyes scanning for signs of life. Inside, the mill was a maze of shadows, broken beams, and rusted machinery. Clara's flashlight caught a glint in the corner, a shovel, its blade caked with fresh dirt. Beside it was a pile of cigarette butts, still smelling of tobacco. Someone had been here, recently. Clara, Nate called softly, pointing to a wall. Scratched into the wood was a single word, Whitaker. Below it, a date, July 11, 81. Clara's breath caught. The day her family disappeared. The word wasn't just a name, it was a marker, a claim. She stepped closer, her fingers brushing the carving, when a creak echoed from above. All three froze, their flashlights swinging upward. The loft was dark, but something moved, a shadow, quick and deliberate, slipping out of sight. Maisie gasped, gripping her tire iron. He's here. Nate raised his hammer, his voice low. Stay together. Clara's hand went to the revolver, her heart pounding. The shadow moved again, faster, and a loud crash echoed as a beam fell, blocking the stairs to the loft. Dust clouded the air, and when it cleared, the shadow was gone. They scrambled outside, their flashlights sweeping the surrounding woods. Nothing but silence greeted them, the trees swallowing any trace of the figure. Clara's mind raced. Jonah Hale, or whoever he was, knew they were getting close. And he wasn't running. Back in the truck, Clara clutched the ledger, her resolve hardening. He's not just watching, she said. He's hunting. And we're not stopping until we know why. As they drove back to the farmhouse, a storm broke over the fields, lightning cracking the sky. In its flash, Clara swore she saw the man again, standing by the tractor, his hat tilted low, his shovel gleaming like a blade. Rain lashed the Whitaker farmhouse, the storm's roar drowning out the usual hum of crickets. Clara Hensley sat at the kitchen table, the leather-bound ledger open before her, its cryptic entries, JH, 500, June 15, 81, tr. 200, July 1, 81, staring back like a taunt. The photograph of the unknown man, the revolver, Lily's journal, and the bundle of cash from the creek bed lay scattered beside it, each piece a fragment of the puzzle that was her family's disappearance in July 1981. The word Whitaker carved into the mill's wall, dated the day they vanished, burned in her mind. And the shadow, Jonah Hale or someone else, lurked out there, watching, waiting. Nate Carver stood by the window, his silhouette tense against the flickering lightning. "We can't keep chasing shadows, Clara," he said, his voice low. "That guy at the mill, he's dangerous. We need to go to the sheriff." Maisie Tate, curled up on the couch with her tire iron close, shook her head. "Sheriff Dawson's useless. My dad says he was in on whatever happened back then. Covered it up." Clara's jaw tightened. Maisie's words echoed her own suspicions. Dawson had been a deputy in 81, quick to label the Whitakers' disappearance a family matter. The town's silence, the lack of a real investigation, it all pointed to something deeper, something rotten. "No sheriff," she said. "Not yet. We're close to answers. I can feel it." Nate turned, his eyes heavy with worry. "Close to what? Getting hurt?" "That beam at the mill didn't fall by accident." Clara didn't answer. She flipped through the ledger again, her fingers pausing on an entry dated July 10, 1981, JH, 1000, final payment. Tractor. Her breath caught. The tractor, the heart of the mystery, with its scratched-up cab and hidden revolver, was tied to Jonah Hale. But why? "We need to go back to the tractor," Clara said, standing. "There's something we missed." Maisie's eyes widened. "In this storm? Are you crazy?" "Maybe," Clara said, grabbing her jacket. "But that tractor's been hiding secrets for 40 years. It's time they came out." The storm battered the wheat fields, rain turning the earth to mud. Clara led the way, her flashlight cutting through the downpour, the crowbar heavy in her hand. Nate followed, his hammer tucked into his belt, his face grim. Maisie trailed behind, her tire iron swinging, her braid plastered to her neck. The tractor loomed ahead, its rusted frame slick with rain, the cab door swaying wildly in the wind. Clara climbed into the cab, shielding her flashlight from the rain. The scratches on the inner wall, jagged, desperate, almost like letters, seemed to pulse in the flickering light. She ran her fingers over them, tracing the faint outline of an L and a W. "Lily," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm. "What were you trying to tell us?" Nate leaned in, his flashlight sweeping the cab. "Look here," he said, pointing to the floor. A panel beneath the seat, barely noticeable under the grime, was loose. Clara pried it open with her crowbar, revealing a small, hidden compartment. Inside was a folded piece of paper, yellowed but intact, sealed with wax. Clara broke the seal, her hands trembling. The paper was a handwritten note, in Ellen's neat script: "If you find this, it's too late. Jonah knows about the money. He says it's his, but it's blood money. Amos hid it in the creek bed. If we don't give it up, he'll take everything. I'm sorry, Lily. I should have listened." Clara's heart sank. Blood money. The ledger, the cash, the revolver, it all pointed to a deal gone wrong. But what had Amos been involved in? And why had Ellen and Lily paid the price? Maisie's voice broke through, sharp with panic. "Clara. Someone's coming." Clara spun, her flashlight catching a figure emerging from the wheat, a man, tall and wiry, his hat pulled low against the rain. The shovel in his hand gleamed, its blade sharp despite the storm. He moved with purpose, closing the distance fast. "Run!" Nate shouted, grabbing Maisie's arm. But Clara stood frozen, the note clutched in her hand. The man stopped 10 feet away, his face still hidden by the hat. Lightning flashed, illuminating his features for a split second, sharp cheekbones, a scar across his jaw. He wasn't old enough to be Jonah Hale, not the Jonah from 1981. "Who are you?" Clara demanded, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. The man tilted his head, rain dripping from his hat. "You're digging where you shouldn't," he said, his voice low, almost swallowed by the storm. "Give me the box." Clara's hand went to the revolver in her jacket, but she hesitated. "You're not Jonah Hale," she said. "Who are you?" The man's lips curled into a smirk. "Jonah's boy. And that money's mine." The words hit like a punch. Jonah's boy, his son, carrying on his father's grudge. Clara's mind raced, piecing it together. Jonah Hale, the handyman, had been tied to her family's disappearance, demanding money they'd hidden. Now his son was here, chasing the same secret, the same blood money. Nate stepped forward, his hammer raised. "Back off," he growled. "We don't have your money." The man's eyes flicked to Nate, then back to Clara. "You found the box. I saw you. Hand it over, and I walk away." Clara's grip tightened on the note. The ledger, the cash, they were back at the farmhouse, but this man didn't know that. She could stall, buy time. "It's not here," she said. "We left it in the barn." The man's smirk faded. He raised the shovel, its blade catching the lightning. "Don't lie to me." Before Clara could respond, Maisie lunged, her tire iron swinging. The man dodged, but the move threw him off balance, and Nate tackled him into the mud. The shovel fell, sinking into the earth. Clara grabbed Maisie, pulling her back as Nate pinned the man down. "Who are you?" Clara shouted, her flashlight trained on his face. "What did your father do to my family?" The man struggled, but Nate's grip held. "Name's Caleb Hale," he spat. "My dad didn't do nothing. Your uncle owed him. Owed him big. That money was his, and Amos hid it. Got what he deserved." Clara's blood ran cold. "Deserved?" "They disappeared. My cousin was 16. Caleb's eyes gleamed with something dark, anger, maybe, or guilt. "They should have paid. That's all I'm saying." Nate tightened his hold. "Where's the money now, Clara?" "Safe," she said, her mind racing. The cash was at the farmhouse, but Caleb's words suggested more, a motive, a murder. If Jonah Hale had killed her family over this blood money, his son was here to finish what he started. Lightning cracked again, and Caleb twisted free, shoving Nate into the mud. He scrambled to his feet, grabbing the shovel and vanishing into the wheat before they could stop him. The storm swallowed his footsteps, leaving only the pounding rain. Back at the farmhouse, Clara locked the door, her hands shaking. Nate was bruised but unharmed, and Maisie's bravado had returned, though her eyes were wide with shock. The ledger, cash, and note lay on the table, a map to a truth Clara wasn't sure she could face. "Caleb Hale," Nate said, wiping mud from his face. "Jonah's son. He's been watching us this whole time." Clara nodded, her eyes on Ellen's note. Blood money. The term echoed in her mind, heavy with implication. "Amos was involved in something illegal," she said. "Something worth killing for. And Jonah Hale, or his son, thinks the money's still out there." Maisie's voice was small. "What do we do now?" Clara looked out the window, the storm raging beyond. Caleb was still out there, and he knew they had the box. The tractor, the creek bed, the mill, it was all leading to a confrontation she couldn't avoid. "We find the rest of the money," she said. "And we find out what really happened to my family. Before he does." As the rain battered the roof, Clara's flashlight caught a glint outside, a flicker of movement near the barn. Caleb was back, and he wasn't alone. Another figure stood beside him, shorter, cloaked in shadow. Clara's heart stopped. The mystery wasn't just about money, it was about something, or someone, still hiding in Harrow. The storm hadn't relented, its thunder shaking the Whitaker farmhouse as Clara Hensley stood by the window, her breath fogging the glass. The glint of movement near the barn, two figures, Caleb Hale and another, shrouded in shadow, lingered in her mind like a warning. The ledger, the cash, Ellen's note, and Lily's journal lay on the kitchen table, pieces of a 40-year-old puzzle that pointed to blood money and betrayal. The tractor, with its scratched-up cab, stood at the heart of it all, a rusted sentinel guarding the truth about her family's disappearance in July 1981. Clara's hand rested on the revolver, its cold weight grounding her. Whatever Caleb wanted, it ended tonight. Nate Carver checked the locks, his hammer tucked into his belt, his face etched with exhaustion. "We can't stay holed up here, Clara," he said. "Caleb's not giving up. And that other figure, whoever they are, they're part of this." Maisie Tate, her tire iron gripped tightly, nodded from the couch. "We should have gone to the sheriff. Now we're trapped." "No," Clara said, her voice firm. "The sheriff buried this once. We're finishing it ourselves." She turned to the table, picking up Ellen's note. "If you find this, it's too late. Jonah knows about the money. He'll take everything." The words fueled her resolve. Her Uncle Amos, Aunt Ellen, and Cousin Lily hadn't just vanished, they'd been erased, and Caleb Hale was chasing the same secret that had destroyed them. Clara opened the ledger, her eyes scanning the final entry, JH, 1,000, final payment. Tractor. The money's the key, she said. Caleb thinks there's more, and he thinks it's still out there. We need to get to the tractor before he does. Nate frowned, rain streaking the window behind him. In this storm? It's suicide. It's our only shot, Clara said. The tractor's where it started. It's where it ends. The field was a quagmire, the wheat flattened by the storm's fury. Clara led the way, her flashlight cutting through the rain, the crowbar in one hand, the revolver in her jacket. Nate followed, his flashlight sweeping the darkness, while Maisie stayed close, her tire iron gleaming wetly. The tractor loomed ahead, its cab door banging in the wind, the scratches inside a silent scream from the past. As they reached it, lightning illuminated the field, revealing two figures near the barn, Caleb Hale, his shovel raised, and a shorter figure, hooded, holding a flashlight. Clara's heart pounded. They're searching, she whispered. They think the money's in the barn. Nate's eyes narrowed. Let's use that. Get to the tractor while they're distracted. Clara climbed into the cab, the rain soaking her through. The scratches, L.W., jagged and desperate, seemed to glow in the flashlight's beam. She ran her fingers over them, her mind racing. Lily's journal had mentioned digging, the creek bed, the tractor. The money they'd found was only a fraction. There had to be more. Check the floor again, Nate said, climbing in beside her. He knelt, probing the loose panel they'd found before. This time, his fingers caught on a hidden latch, revealing a deeper compartment. Inside was a small, waterproof pouch, heavy with coins and tightly rolled bills, thousands of dollars, maybe tens of thousands. Clara's breath caught. This is it. The blood money. Maisie, standing guard outside, hissed, "They're coming." Clara stuffed the pouch into her jacket, her mind reeling. The money was real, but what had Amos done to get it? And why had Jonah Hale, and now his son, killed for it? Caleb's voice cut through the storm, sharp and cold. "I know you're there, Whitaker. Give me what's mine." Clara stepped out of the cab, the revolver in her hand, rain streaming down her face. Caleb stood 20 feet away, his shovel gleaming, the hooded figure beside him. Lightning flashed, revealing the second figure's face, Sheriff Dawson, his eyes hard, his flashlight trained on Clara. "You," Clara said, her voice trembling with rage. "You covered it up." Dawson's face was unreadable, rain dripping from his hat. "You don't understand, Clara. Your uncle was in deep. Smuggling, debts, dirty money. Jonah was his muscle. Things went wrong." Clara's grip tightened on the revolver. "So you let them die? My family?" "They made their choices," Dawson said. "Amos hid the money, crossed Jonah. I tried to clean it up, keep the town out of it. But you couldn't leave it alone." Caleb stepped forward, his shovel raised. "The money, Whitaker. Now." Nate moved beside Clara, his hammer ready. "Back off, Hale. It's over." Maisie raised her tire iron, her voice fierce. "You're not getting anything." Lightning cracked, and Caleb lunged, his shovel swinging. Clara fired the revolver into the air, the shot echoing like thunder. Caleb froze, his eyes wide. Dawson raised his hands, his flashlight dropping to the mud. "Enough!" Clara shouted. "Tell me what happened to them. Where are they?" Dawson's shoulders sagged, the fight draining from him. "The creek bed," he said, his voice barely audible over the rain. "Jonah," he panicked. "Buried them there. I looked the other way." Clara's world tilted, the revolver shaking in her hand. Her family, Amos, Ellen, Lily, buried in the creek bed, steps from where she'd found the box. The scratches, Lily's journal, the money, it all led to this brutal truth. Caleb's face twisted. "My dad deserved that money. Amos cheated him. I'm taking what's mine." "You're taking nothing," Clara said, her voice steel. She tossed the pouch into the mud, coins spilling out. "It's cursed. It killed my family. It'll kill you too." Caleb lunged for the pouch, but Nate tackled him, pinning him in the mud. Maisie swung her tire iron, knocking the shovel from his hands. Dawson didn't move, his eyes fixed on Clara, guilt etched into his face. "You let them die," Clara said, tears mixing with the rain. "You let a whole town forget." Dawson nodded, his voice breaking. I'm sorry. The storm was fading as Clara led Dawson and Caleb, hands bound with rope, to the farmhouse. Nate called the state police, bypassing Harrow's corrupt sheriff. Maisie stood guard, her tire iron at the ready, her young face fierce with pride. Clara returned to the creek bed alone, the rain now a drizzle. She knelt where they'd found the box, her hands digging into the mud. She didn't expect to find them, not after 40 years, but she needed to try. Her fingers brushed something hard, a bone, small and fragile. Lilies, maybe. Tears fell, mixing with the earth. The police arrived at dawn, their lights flashing across the fields. They took Dawson and Caleb away, the ledger and money as evidence. Excavators moved into the creek bed, unearthing fragments of a truth long buried. Amos, Ellen, and Lily were gone, but Clara had given them a voice. Back at the farmhouse, Clara sat with Nate and Maisie, the journal open before them. They didn't run, she said. They fought. And we fought for them. Nate put a hand on her shoulder. You did right by them, Clara. Maisie nodded, her eyes bright. You're not alone here anymore. Clara looked out at the tractor, still standing in the field, its cab door still. It wasn't cursed, just a witness to a tragedy. The lesson wasn't in the money or the secrets, it was in the courage to face the past, to stand together, to rebuild on broken ground. As the sun rose, painting the wheat gold, Clara felt the weight lift, just a little. The tractor would stay, a reminder of resilience, of family, of a truth finally set free. But in the distance, where the creek bed lay, a question lingered. What else had Harrow buried? The end.